This is Tim Cain conflating player skill with character skill.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about conflating player skill with player character skill. Now, I'm answering a question by Vol4Ak, who asks, how to resolve the conflict between player skill and their character's ability in an action RPG. To elaborate with an example, Fallout in the past was all about skill checks and dice rolls.
Okay.
But starting with Fallout 3, the first-person shooter aspect became more emphasized with each release.
I like his shirt.
Where's the line between letting the player be a good shot because the game mechanics allow them, and the player being a good shot because they built a character that is a good shot?
There's different methods of strategy, right? You know, building a good character that can solve problems still requires you to strategize your character build and attempt to solve problems in that manner. So that's where the strategy is. You could also say, you know, Elden Ring is almost entirely a game of skill. If you are good at dodging and you learn attack patterns, you can beat pretty much everything in the game with your bare fists and without leveling. It's hard, but it's a game that is almost entirely about player skill, not about randomness or luck. Especially the main game. The DLC is a little bit tougher in that regard, but especially the main game. And that's just a different, you know, it's a game that doesn't require you to build up to a certain level to solve certain problems. You're not hard locked out of being able to get into a room that requires a lockpick because you didn't take any skills in lockpicking. But they still both require strategy, they require thought, just in a different way.
First of all, that's a good question. Second, I apologize. The beast is snoring super loudly.
His dog.
I didn't shut the door in time, so just live with that. I could have sworn that I'd answered this question before, and I scoured my channel because I had a memory of talking about it. Then I realized that I talked about this exact topic as one of the 7 mistakes people make when they're designing an RPG.
We should watch that.
Let's take a quick look at that so I don't repeat myself.
Similar to the last one is a mistake. I made this in a lot of my games. You conflate player skill with character skill. And this image is a good example of player skill. It's what I said. It's like you've got your reticle dead set on somebody in a game, and he's not moving, you're not moving, the reticle's not moving, and you press fire and this happens. And you're like, how did that happen? How did the bullet go around him?
Yeah.
And the problem is you've conflated something that the player is controlling with an underlying character skill. So what I always
XCOM 99%, exactly.
Everything that I think the player is going to be able to control, and I call that a player skill. And then all the other ones are called character skills. And when I actually put skills in for the player character, they only control the areas that the player doesn't feel like he has direct involvement in. For example, aiming is always going to be player controlled. I don't want to, I've done this in my past games. I'm not going to do any more where the reticle moves around. I think it did that in Vampire.
Yeah, I fucking hate that, by the way. I don't like the reticle moving. It's just like you're putting roadblocks in front of my skill and calling them immersion. It's a yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like the reticle moving. I don't like that. I can understand that a gun might have accuracy, but don't hinder my aiming as a way to... Wait, is he cut the pizza? Does he cut the pizza, da pal? But either way, yeah, I don't like doing that, so no. Don't make the reticle move around.
I'm not going to do the other thing where even though your reticle's on you, there's a big spread around it. So even though my reticle's on you, I may miss because the fiction is, well, you're going to hit anywhere in this inner circle.
RNG bad, right? I have a problem with RNG with games.
Things like, okay, recoil will be controlled by the character skills. So as you put more points into, say, your shotgun skill, after you shoot it and the shotgun goes like this, the speed at which it comes back, the recoil, is sped up. The player doesn't feel like he's controlling that, but he sees an immediate reaction to, like, he put new points in there, and now his shotgun's coming back
Too much
faster.
RNG is bad, not
Finally,
enough RNG is bad.
Skill, the shotgun just kind of goes, boom, really just kind of shakes a little bit, and he's immediately ready to fire again. It has the mathematical...
generally speaking.
the mathematical result that you want, which is the player will be doing more damage per second because he'll be able to fire more frequently. But it's much more psychologically satisfying to the player because he's feeling like the aiming is completely under his control, and
That's fair,
the
Ponzo.
shotgun is getting more and more under his control as his skill goes up, but it doesn't feel like something he as the player is making happen. It's something he's putting points into in his character. Similarly, remember the critical hits I just talked about? That should be critical. That should be under character control as well, or character skill. Whether that's a skill or a perk that makes you get more damage as you go up, the player puts points into that or buys extra perks, and then they see themselves doing more critical hit damage. Not
RNG based critical hits works sometime. I think that I might lean a little bit more towards giving different enemies different critical hit points, right? But it really depends on game. When I played Doom 2016, the NPCs don't really have that crazy of critical hit spots, right? Because the game isn't really about doing critical hits or aiming correctly. Doom is about going in there, fucking shit up, destroying things, killing the demons, and coming out alive. Doom Eternal went a different route where you had to use specific weapons and shoot in specific locations, and to me it felt like less of a Doom game than Doom 2016. It was still an enjoyable shooter, but it didn't feel like Doom anymore. It felt more like Quake, right? So it's one of those cases of, sure, there might be some people who really like the reticle moving and it works for certain types of games. Critical hits, doing more damage or something, or just hit, you have more of a chance to deal critical hits with certain weapons, or if you hit certain body parts, that's cool too. I tend to lean with player skill being the determining factor of whether or not something goes well in a game and not relying on RNG. A game that I worked on that I think RNG went a bit too far was Darkest Dungeon. Some RNG is good, but the player, RNG should be used as a way to put the player in tough positions and provide a little bit of variation. It should not be the determining factor in whether a fight is won or lost. And that's why I'm not a huge fan of some ways that Darkest Dungeon handled its RNG. As much as I love XCOM, it can sometimes be a little frustrating too. But I don't think it's not nearly as, well, depending on your difficulty, I guess it can be pretty bad. But either way, put the player in a tough situation with RNG, but allow them to control it in some way. And if they can't control the RNG, then it just kind of exists to fuck them over.
Not critically hitting more frequently.
Alrighty, so that was me in Reboot 2017 talking about player skill and versus character skill. And the summary is, any actions that feel like they're controlled by the player, those are player skills. And any actions that the player doesn't feel like he's directly in control of, those are character skills. And the skills that you design to put into your game should be character skills. Now, I haven't always done that. I believe, when I mentioned in the talk that in Vampire, the worse your skill, your combat skill was, you just got a bigger reticle, and when you shot, it didn't shoot at what was at the target, the crosshair. It shot anywhere in the reticle, and that just didn't feel as good.
That's not gonna feel good.
One of the things we did, like in Outer Worlds, was we said, okay, there are certain things that are player controlled, like a melee weapon. If you hit with a sword, that's a player controlled skill. If you're within range of somebody, within range of your melee weapon, and you're aimed at them and your arc goes through them, you hit. There's no roll, there's no checking.
Morrowind.
If you're too far away, if they're on the other side of the room and you're doing this, you do not hit. But if they're right in front of you, you hit. But how much damage do you do with that swing? That's controlled by your melee skill. So that's a character skill. That's something you can put points in. And as you put more points into it, you don't hit more often, but your hits do more damage. That has the mathematical result we want, which is as you put points into skills, your character is getting better, measurably better damage output.
I want to emphasize, I know this doesn't have really anything to do with this video in particular, but if people know the juxtaposition gratification drama that I've had in this channel, I don't think I ever released that video, but it's in one of my old VODs for Colon Chronicles. But either way, just notice how when Tim talks, he doesn't use any of these phrases. He might use some words that may not be understandable by non-designers or non-developers, but they're never overly complex. And that's what makes him a very good designer, is he can explain these things. Like the reticle moving around doesn't feel good because you're shooting all over. He doesn't make up some bullshit term to explain this, like the I don't know, the gun stick ungratification or some bullshit. It's just like gun shoots all around, not where you aim, doesn't feel good. Because that's all you need to say. Oh, it does it really well. You have to consider the failure state of your action. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. You know, it's kind of like chess, right? Where the RNG element is the other player in chess. But that you can predict your actions and the actions of the other player, and the strategy comes from playing the other player, and the RNG there. It's not like it's random, right? It's designed. People are designed to try to win this, and you're not playing against just some random algorithm, but rather another human being. That's a kind of a shit example, but it just, you know, keep in mind when Tim talks that he's doing it in a way that is very understandable for non-developers even. That you can get why something feels bad, because you don't need to come up with bullshit explanations of why something doesn't feel bad.
With the weapon that uses that skill that they just increased. Now, something I don't mention in that video is that this should apply to non-combat skills as well. It shouldn't just be combat skills that the player feels like they have some control over. For example, let's say you're playing a role-playing game and you enter a room and there's a big puddle of blood on the ground.
Yeah.
Now, it would be really annoying if you hovered over it and it allowed no interaction because your search skill or your observation skill or your, medical skill, whatever controls looking at that blood, if that skill wasn't high enough, it'd be really weird if it didn't let you interact with that at all.
Yeah, you should still be able to interact with it. Maybe you just don't glean as much information. Or you could even say that as you raise up your search skill, some things become automatically highlighted, right? Or maybe your character will say something like, "Oh, I should search that blood." These are kind of, shitty examples, but just do it in a way that helps the player, augments the player, but don't prevent the player from doing it. You maybe just make it harder for the player, right? That the skill makes certain things easier, but they're not impossible. I think a good example would be, unless I'm mistaken, but in Oblivion, couldn't you actually, no, Skyrim and Oblivion are both the same way. You can lockpick any chest you want. You can start up the game, have a master lock, and you can try to lockpick it. It's just going to be really, really difficult. As opposed to Fallout, where you have to have the 25, 50, 75 perks in order to lockpick certain lock, difficulties. So you can't even try it. You can't even attempt to do it. I kind of prefer the Elder Scrolls system where I can still attempt to do it, but it's going to be really, really difficult. So I either need to be really good at the mini game, or Fallout 3, because I think with Fallout 4 they did. You just took perk points. 1-2 New Vegas, I think, let you try. Oh god, I don't remember. I don't think New Vegas did. I know Fallout 4 moved to like perk points. I don't remember. Either way, whichever one didn't let you do it unless you had the skill level. I don't prefer that. I prefer allow the player to do it, but just make it more difficult, right? If you have failure states in RNG, you have to give the player options to lessen the impact before they fail. Agree. XCOM is where you wipe if you miss that one shot. That's true. That's true.
Would be bad. So a better design would be, you can always see the blood and you always get to click on the blood. If you walk up to it, you get an interaction, but the information you get back is dependent on your skill. If you have a very low skill, it'll just go, that's blood.
That's blood.
If you have...
It's like Intelligence 1 build.
a
Looks
higher
red.
skill, it may go, that's blood, and it's still wet. It hasn't coagulated. That blood has been there less than an hour. If you have a really high skill, it may go, wow, if that blood came from one person and the splatter makes it look like
Yeah, it's like that's too much blood. Maybe the person's not alive or something.
it was, that's more blood than a person can lose and still live.
Yeah, yeah.
That person is dead.
That's pretty cool.
And was killed within the last hour. You just give them
Red
more
paint.
information because their character skill is better.
That'd be pretty
Similarly,
funny.
if you have like a safe in the room, don't let the player not interact with the safe if their lockpicking skill isn't high enough. They can always interact with
Right,
it.
Tim?
But the lockpicking
Right?
skill itself.
Thank you.
If you want to put a lockpicking game in there, the lockpicking controls
Love Tim.
the skill
And I.
controls how hard that
Two peas in a
lockpicking
pod.
mini game is. If you don't want to do a mini game, then yes, there's some minimum skill you need to be able to pick that lock. But not interacting with the lock at all, that's not fun.
No, it's not.
So, and by the way,
Or not having alternative options to deal with the lock. Like maybe with a high enough strength skill, I can just fucking break open the lock. I did that in Baldur's Gate 3 a lot because I was my fiance when her and I played together. Because normally I play like a roguish character and I can pick lock. When we were playing together, I was a paladin with a two-handed weapon, and she was a Eldritch Blast. What's it called? What's the class? Either way. And so she was like, she was lockpicking it, and I would just Warlock, thank you, and I just smashed it while she was in the lockpicking interface. Like, got it open for you. That's fun. That works. Enables different builds. Smite the chest, right? Throw it off a cliff. Yeah, you can throw it off a cliff. Actually, yeah, absolutely. Throwing it off a cliff is a great option too. Oh, ketchup.
and I didn't mention it at the reboot conference either. When I say skill, it could be anything. I'm not talking directly skill. Actually, I do think I brought it up because I mentioned perks. But what I mean is anything that you put points into in your character, whether it's attributes, perks, anything, those can all, that's what I mean when I say that's the character skill. That's the thing you're checking against to let the player do more damage, let the player do more critical hit damage, let the player get more information from something he's interacting with. That's the skill you check. Whether it's a perk or an attribute, I don't care. It's that thing. It's that thing that's on the character. Also, this conflation issue is way more of a problem on first-person games like action RPGs and shooters, because in a turn-based isometric game, there are so many layers of abstraction there that the player kind of understands that whether or not he's going to hit with this gun is dependent on his character and not the little crosshair that you have as your.
Yeah, you're kind of you're accepting the fact that's a really good point that he brings up, that you're accepting the fact that you aren't the one in control. You're not the one with the skill in this case. The character is. You are required to strategize for the character, but the character has their own set of attributes that this is working off of. That's a really good point that I didn't think about. Yeah. Dark and Darker Barbarian can smash chests, so you let teammates start to open it and smash it. Same thing, very satisfying. That's cool. Yeah. I like that. I think a good example, too, is Deep Rock Galactic. Right? Where give the players the tools, let them use the tools in the ways that they need. And so you can, it's all based on player skill. If a player is fast enough and puts a platform underneath a falling character, right? If you're playing, I think it's NG with the platforms, right? And you have the perk that softens the landing. You hit right where you shoot, and if you're fast enough, you can save your teammate from dying. So, yeah, I like games where it rewards skill, and the barrier to getting better is not playing. Or I'm sorry, maybe I should reword it. The barrier to getting better is entirely dependent on your experience and how much better you get understanding the game's mechanics, as opposed to taking a perk, something that you knew you had to do, and now you've leveled up enough and you just automatically get that unlocked, things that you couldn't do before. Another good example would be GTFO. That's a game that is entirely, there's no character progression at all. There's no perks. There's no weapon unlocks. You have everything available to you that somebody with 2,000 hours has available to you, has available to them. And how good you are is entirely dependent on how much you learn and how you strategize how you're going to get through those levels. And I like that. You can teach other people too.
Somebody. And I mean, they should know that, because if it's a turn-based game, certainly they don't think that everybody's just standing there like, you know, like this, waiting for their turn. No, it's an abstraction. So the more abstracted your game is, the more...
I think, who was it, like Viva La Dirt League or something? What was it? Those people who make like those MMO shorts on YouTube? Do they still make those? Like, what if like certain things in MMO were recreated in real life? I would love to see one where they recreate a turn-based strategy game in real life. Like you're running up to a character, you know, about to slice them with a sword, but you stop because you don't have enough action points to slice them. And they're like, "Okay, it's your turn now. So hold on, don't move anywhere. I'm gonna slice you."
People will buy that player skill and character skill can be conflated.
Yeah.
But once you go first person, once you make it more of an action game, once you make it more of a sim, people
like real
want
time.
those two things to be conflated less. They feel like, I'm in charge of this. My character can be in charge of something else. I think this hopefully answers your question. It's something that, depending on what kind of game you're making, how abstract your game is, that's how far apart you need to make player and character skills be in your design. But a good feedback, of course, is listening to your testers in QA, people in focus groups, see what it is they're feeling when they play the game, and see if any of that is you conflating player skill with character skill, and then see how you can separate the two. Anyway, I hope this answers your question.
That's a great topic. I really enjoyed that. That gives me some things to think about, and I think that's a good way to start to define some of these problems that you have. Some of these things you kind of do as a designer without thinking or without knowing, but it's good to consciously know that, are you putting barriers in front of the player's skill just so that they exist? Right? I know that sometimes progression can take that way too, where it's like, oh, we need some progression, so let's just make it more difficult for the player to do action A until they level up, right? And it's like, well, is action A something that makes sense to hinder the player, or are we just hindering the player's own skill? Or are we even, is the game even harder to play when you first start the game, and then it gets easier to play later on after you've unlocked all these skills? So now the challenge of the game actually goes down instead of going up, right? There's a lot of different nuances to progression and how you should best try to approach it. This was great though, guys. Go give Tim a like and follow for this one as well. As usual, fantastic video.